Another episode of Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton. And on this episode, we will be talking about the Indianapolis Colts as they get ready to take on the Tennessee Titans. And I figured I'd bring on someone that knows extensively about the Indianapolis Colts. He's there every day. That'd be the Athletics' James Wood. What's going on, man?
Living the dream, man. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you for coming on. But before we get started, of course, I do have to mention we got a new sponsor. Yes, Manscaped is a new sponsor for Touring the AFC South. Now, if you pay attention, usually I do like a little commercial or something like that. But I figured, hey, let me go ahead and do it myself this time. Now, Manscaped did send me a few things, like we've got the deodorant, we got the clippers, all them different things they can send you to better groom yourself. They got it. And guess what? You can get it from me for 20% off at Manscaped. Go to manscaped.com, 20% off plus free shipping with the promo code AFC South. Again, 20% off at manscaped.com plus free shipping with the promo code AFC South. That's manscaped.com. Now we can go ahead and get started and talk about a little football. And of course, we're going to talk about the Colts and get into that. But I do have to get something off my chest that I saw happen. Now, Twitter helped me find what I got to get off my chest today. But I'm going to let you all experience it a little bit if you haven't seen it. Just check this clip out right here.
Better tonight than what you anticipated he would be watching him on tape, and you could be honest.
Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, we knew it was going to be a battle. He's continuing to get better week in and week out, and he's continued to lead week in and week out.
But watching that tape, man, you got to look at this dude and say, "Oh, he is garbage." Like we should really tear him apart earlier.
Like I said, Zach Wilson is special, man. You just got to give the guy time. You know what I mean?
Wait. Did you say Zach Wilson is special?
Yeah.
I think he had a special night, but I don't think he's special. I've got to prove that over. You're special because you proved it over a course of time. He's not special. I'm just saying, Chris.
Hey, listen.
I'm just saying.
Taylor.
Was Zach better tonight?
As you can see in that clip, Rodney Harrison was clearly trying to bait Chris Jones into saying something terrible about Zach Wilson, a guy he just played against, a guy that had a good game, but Rodney had to take it and turn it into something else that it totally wasn't supposed to be about. But, I would say that Rodney Harrison's had these types of moments on television before. So we shouldn't be shocked that he's having these type of moments. Was it in bad taste to me? Yes. Chris gave his answer. You went and followed up with something to try to get him to push him into saying something else. You should have asked him the question. He answered the question. Drop it after that. In my opinion, I just think it was just in poor taste. He was trying to bait him into saying something. And, it just was uncalled for, in my opinion. James, you got any thoughts on that one, man?
I think a lot of it just has to come down to remembering that you're talking about people, right? So he had a good game. You can be critical of that, but you don't have to make it personal. And then just being young myself in this industry, you learn to ask the question, and whatever response you get, you can't control that response. So there's been plenty of times I might have asked the question, not saying I'm baiting anybody, but just in general, where you expect a certain response and you don't get that. You don't then follow up and try to get the response that you may have wanted or anticipated. Respect to Chris. Obviously, Rodney Harrison is a legend in the NFL world, got champion, all those things. But at the end of the day, still talking about human beings.
Right. Exactly. I think he forgot that in his little soliloquy there. But we're going to move forward and we're going to talk about, of course, the Colts. But before we talk about the Colts, we're going to talk about you, James. Of course, I didn't, but I wanted to kind of get everyone to get to know you since this is your first time on the show. Can you kind of tell everyone when did you kind of first get into writing?
Yeah, so I was not one of those kids who grew up reading newspaper, sitting on my dad's lap or something like that. That just didn't happen in my household. Newspapers were for garbage. Cleaning up and something like that. You about to paint, put some newspaper down, those types of things. So I got started when I was in college. I went to University of Illinois. I got a shirt on actually today, repping the Illini. And I started off as a communication major, and I switched to journalism after I took one class where I was intrigued about it. Storytelling, asking the right questions, building out a story, those things. And I kept bugging one of my teachers, who I thank to this day, Jennifer Follis. She told me after class one day, hey, stop, talking to me. I love you, but go write for the student newspaper. And so that's how I got my start. I want to say it might have been my sophomore year, end of my sophomore year of college, or first semester junior year, but I didn't get started right away in college. I didn't even know what I want to do really. But I was like, you know what? This is something I actually enjoy. I still love sports. How can I stay around athletics, even though I'm not going to be this dynamic athlete? Like, I knew after high school I was going to be done. I wasn't delusional, but at the same time, you're still searching for something, right? So that's how I got my start. Did the student newspaper grind for a while. My first beat I ever covered was Illinois men's gymnastics. So you're going in thinking you're going to cover football or basketball, and your first beat is men's gymnastics. And you got to learn about the different flips and moves, and all the guys there are very buff and handsome, and all of those things is humbling, right? So I did that and worked my way up to doing, volleyball, softball, women's basketball, to eventually men's and basketball and football, and then landed an internship with the Associated Press my senior year, which was, obviously a big time get, very stressful at first, very hard. And another moment where I have to thank someone, Shannon Ryan, who works for The Athletic now as a women's basketball editor. And we just collaborated on a story about Aaliyah Boston, the rookie of the year here for the Indiana Fever. She was at the Chicago Tribune at the time. And when I was getting chewed out by one of my editors at the Associated Press one day, she saw me kind of dejected, and I was about to quit that day. I was like, man, I'm not about to do this. And if every idea I have is bad, I'm just not going to do this. I'll pick something else. She pulled me to the side when I was about to leave the stadium after a football game once and told me, hey, that idea I overheard you kind of getting chewed out for, I'm going to use that today in the Chicago Tribune, which is like the biggest paper from where I'm from. And so she gave me her number and told me, hey, if you ever need any advice, I'm here for you. I'll help you out. And fast forward, she ended up missing a game for whatever reason, because she traveled from Chicago to Champaign, where Illinois football was at the time. So it's like a 2.5-hour drive. Can't make it to every game. And the game that she didn't make it to, by that point, I had kind of got the hang of it with AP. And they pulled my AP story and put it in the Tribune that weekend. And so she took a screenshot of it and sent it to me as a text message. Just said, hey, remember I told you could do this? You're doing it. And so that was like, man, that was one of the best moments ever. And so that gave me a huge confidence boost, obviously, going forward. And then getting out of college, applied to a ton of different places. Heard back from two. One of them was NBC Sports Chicago. Thought I'd be working downtown and doing the big time pro thing right away. Went on 5 interviews, didn't get the job. Very humbling. And then I went on one interview at the Times of Northwest Indiana, the region as we call it. The area code is 219. 219 changed my life. Did high school sports there for 2.5 years. Loved it. Built lifelong friendships with coaches, players. Got a ton of little brothers, little sisters everywhere. All these college shirts I have, just because I'm repping all these different schools they went to, and used that to kind of build my way up. And did return to my alma mater. Did college sports as a professional at Illinois for about 6 months. Then I got a job covering the Pacers at Indy Star, moved to Indianapolis, did that for 9 months. And I believe 2021-22, that was the season. And then switched over to covering the Colts for The Athletic here in Indianapolis. And I've been here for about 1.5 years now at this point. But it was a whirlwind ride. 5 years in the game, proud of it. And wouldn't change a thing about it, because every step, every story, every interview, every level helped me get to where I am now. And I'm just so grateful, because at every stop I could say I had a lot of fun, and I'm hoping to continue to have fun for 30, 40, 50 years until I retire.
Well, man, definitely a great story and a lesson in that, because people, you don't know what you're going to do until you really get there at college and experience it. I actually thought I was going to be a sports agent when I got to college. I got the rude awakening about all the different things, and I ended up getting a marketing degree. So I didn't end up getting becoming a sports agent, ended up getting a marketing degree. Go figure. So, but there's another story about that degree, but we'll save that for another day. But let's, of course, we're going to talk about the Indianapolis Colts real quick. The Colts, there wasn't a lot, I would say that people didn't expect a lot from them to start this year. But when you listen around, they're expecting, okay, cool. Them and the Texans probably going to be kind of building their programs up. And then maybe by the end of the year, show something, and then the next year start, that upward trajectory. But lo and behold, they did start the season 2-2, including a big win against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. Just amazing. And of course, with nothing expected or not as much expected from the Colts, there wasn't a ton that people expected from Anthony Richardson this year, or some did it, I should say. But with the right system and, just with his ability, 479 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, 3 games played. He's not necessarily been great, but he hasn't been as bad as some people thought he would be. I thought he would be very solid in this organization. What can you just say about the Colts and Anthony Richardson to start this season?
I think when they hired Shane Steichen, it opened the door to make Anthony Richardson being drafted number 4 and being implemented as the face of the franchise possible. And while he hasn't been, all-time great through his first 3 games because he missed one due to concussion, he's been really good. And I do think that it has been very, very promising. And his floor looks like it's higher than you might have assumed just based off of some of the tape that you saw and just some of the numbers. Obviously having a completion percentage in, the 50s is not good. And to go in the first round, a lot of it was high upside, but also high risk. And right now it looks like that upside is paying off because that dude is a baller, and he'll go through stretches where he does look like the best player on the field. It happened against the Texans, even though he only played 1 quarter, got knocked out with a concussion. He played 18 snaps and scored 2 touchdowns and looked unstoppable. I thought it was going to be the day that I'm writing about him scoring 4 touchdowns and they win going away. Got to protect himself, obviously, going forward. But even in his return this past week against the Rams, they're dead in the water, nothing going, and he gets going in the second half. And for a quarter and a half there, he was the best player on the field, where Matt Stafford, had some great plays, some great moments where he was really good. So I think the biggest thing beyond just the physical talent is that he is a very hard worker. He is very humble, and he looks like he's a quick learner. Just seeing the progress from training camp till now, it looks really good. He looks way more comfortable. And that's not only a credit to him, it's a credit to Shane Steichen continuing to find ways to make him feel comfortable. You hear so much about systems, right? And, is this guy a system quarterback? Well, every quarterback is a system quarterback if they're in the right system. That's ideally what you want, right? You don't want to put him in a system where he can't exploit what he's good at, or he can't point out what he's good at. And so I think Shane Steichen's done a great job of that. Simplifying some of the throws, some of the reads, a lot of rollouts, play action, zone reads, RPOs, all those things to make him comfortable. And then he also has that wow factor where he can make a throw or make a play that maybe only 5 guys in the league can make. Saw a few of those this past Sunday as well. So special talent and also a special human being. Really humble guy, raised the right way. Got to talk to his mom, and his little brother is really cool. And so he's like an alien when he's on the field. But when he's off the field, he's like a regular dude. And the proof, I guess, of that is that when I went to go play basketball at Ursay YMCA down here in downtown Indianapolis, he was there right before training camp. And we played. We hooped like it was nothing, and nobody was really running over. It was kind of like, oh, man, that's Anthony Richardson. But it wasn't like he was walking around like he owned the place. They have a list, actually, when you show up sometime and it's busy, and he signed the list like everybody else. And I'm thinking to myself, you're Anthony Richardson. You could just get on right now, and somebody will drop, their friend and have you play with them. So it lets you know that he's really, really humble, good head on his shoulders, and it doesn't seem like anything has been too much for him. Now, there's been mistakes. There'll be more of that, but he looks really, really good. And I think the Colts feel very, good about choosing him and potentially him becoming, that dude. And here in Indianapolis, obviously, the franchise has been defined by Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck, and they're hoping he can be that next, great one here in Indy.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to watch. With that type of player with those type of measurables and that type of work ethic can be very, very successful.
Like, it's crazy. You see the stuff that he does, and I'm like, do you realize that's not normal? Even so, if you see his touchdown celebration with like the 360 spin spike that he does, that's probably the most athletic thing you'll see on a football field anywhere. So I'm like, that just the fact that he does it so effortlessly, those things just open your eyes. And like I said, when I hoop with him, first play he's out there, if they throw an alley-oop from half court, he catches and reverse dunks it like Vince Carter or something. It's just easy for him. So within that ease, though, he works extremely hard. I think that has come through, and not only because of what he says and what he does, but how his teammates respond to him. I've talked to pretty much everyone who's a starter, whether it's on special teams, offense, defense, whatever. All these guys are rallying behind him because they believe that he approaches the game the right way and doesn't just rely on his amazing talent.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be fun to watch. Another thing that's been fun to watch is the linebacker core of the Colts right now. I mean, you guys, Zaire Franklin leading the team in tackles. I mean, you would think that would be Shaquille Leonard, but no. Zaire Franklin said, hey, hold on, let me take this spotlight. So, what can you say about this linebacker core for the Colts? It wasn't one that, everyone talked about Bobby Okereke not being there this year, but Zaire Franklin stepped in and stepped up, and this linebacker core, along with this defense, has made some things happen.
Yeah, so I did a huge story on Zaire Franklin in The Athletic earlier this year, just detailing his background, raised by his mom and his grandma, who both actually passed when he was in high school, and how that motivated him to kind of stay on the right path, and how he got his toughness and that anger he plays with and that fuel he plays with from them. And the conversations we've had since that story came out, since he had this great year last year where he set the single season tackle record for the Colts, breaking Shaq's record actually, he's not satisfied. He's obsessed with proving that this wasn't a fluke. I didn't just have this big year because Shaq was out or hurt a lot. I'm this player regardless of who is out there with me. And he has been the Colts' best linebacker easily this season. EJ Speed has stepped up, and he's looked really good. He makes an impact play every time he's out there. I was looking at his stat sheet today or stat chart today, and it's like every game, tackle for loss, forced fumble, pass deflection, just doing something to disrupt the play. And then with Shaq, he's been kind of quiet, but just a reminder to everyone out there, especially even the Colts fans who are still getting on him, yes, he hasn't looked like the maniac. He hasn't looked like that all-pro guy, but he's coming off 2 back surgeries. He might need some more time just to get right. And so the fact that he's playing is probably a good sign in general. Not that he's playing bad. It's just that he hasn't received the same amount of snaps. His snap has actually gone down every single week, the percentage of it, because he just hasn't looked like that guy yet. But we talked to defensive coordinator Gus Bradley today, and he was saying that Shaq, they expect him, or that they're hoping and they're planning for him to kind of return to form around November. So he's still about a month away from being that guy, at least in their eyes, as far as his, I don't know if it's a recovery plan. Shaq's kind of coy on that stuff. He doesn't want to, admit, and I get that, doesn't want to admit that he might not be the same player right now. But, I mean, if you got him in your back pocket and you have those guys playing as well as they do in EJ Speed and Zaire Franklin, you have a pretty good linebacker core to complement what has been a really good defensive front as well.
Yeah, definitely. I look forward to seeing just how that linebacker core continues to grow and continues to anchor that defense. But speaking of anchoring things, of course, there's a guy in Tennessee, Mr. Jeffrey Simmons, in the Tennessee Titans that are coming to town. But we're going to talk about the Titans versus the Colts coming up this Sunday. But first, we're going to take a commercial break on Touring the AFC South with your host, Mike Patton.
A shift. A shift is something that happens and changes the dynamics. And that's what happened when Garrett Logistics was born. After 10 years as a sales pro in the logistics world of sporting goods, John Garrett decided to pivot to the world of freight and start a brokerage. So you're saying to yourself, why trust Garrett Logistics? Well, Garrett Logistics helps shippers improve overall workflow, along with increased on-time pickup and delivery percentages. Last-minute loads, multi-drop pickups, and more are part of the services with Garrett Logistics. They're available Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., and Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., all times Central Standard Time. So give them a ring at 615-400-8484. That's 615-400-8484, or you can email them at john@garrettlogistics.co or visit their website at GarrettLogistics.com. Garrett Logistics, where the motto is, it's not just freight to us, it's your business.
All right, and we are back on touring the AFC South. Before we went to break, of course, we said we're going to talk about the Colts versus the Titans. Now, this has been a rivalry in the AFC South for a while now. It's kind of tempered down just a little bit, but it's still a rivalry nonetheless. And, of course, coming to Indianapolis will be this Tennessee Titans team coming off a 27-3 dominating win over the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, one place where the Titans dominated in this game was definitely the defensive line. Jeffrey Simmons, you got Danico Autry, you've got Arden Key, you've got Harold Landry, all these guys making impact plays in this game against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, there's not to say that the Cincinnati Bengals offensive line is great and they were just doing whatever they wanted to, but the Cincinnati Bengals had issues with their offensive line. But they did have a great performance. But, is that something that defensive line of the Titans, is that something to worry about, especially with the Colts offensive line and the issues they've had over the last couple of years?
I think so. Now, the Colts offensive line has been better this year than it was last year. Now, we're only a month in, obviously, so it's a smaller sample size. However, last week they were without their starting center, Ryan Kelly, starting left tackle, Bernard Ryman, because of concussions. They're still in the protocol. We'll see if they're able to return. The one thing I'll say or note is that Ryan Kelly, prior to this concussion, had one in 2017, and he missed 5 games at the end of the year. So it's something to keep in mind. Like, I know people kind of think, oh, you get a concussion 1 week, you'll just play the next week. It's not exactly how that works. Now, Ryan Kelly, had his concussion in the same game, week 2, as Anthony Richardson. And like I said, Kelly didn't play last week, and Anthony Richardson did. So it's something to keep in mind. But you always want to know where, like, a guy, Danico Autry is and other Jeffrey Simmons, because they create havoc. And when you're dealing with a rookie quarterback who I just talked about, who has played well, you still want to put havoc on a rookie quarterback because you never know what he might do. And as much as Anthony Richardson has avoided sort of that rookie wall, I know at some point, because it happens to every player in this league, whether you're a rookie or not, you're going to get humbled. You're going to get got. You're going to get beat, and maybe even badly, just because of what some defenses do to you. So I think with the Titans, they're known, at least in these most recent years, though, they're known for making the game muddy and kind of uglying the game up, and they'll out-ugly you to a win most of the time. Like, I know last week the offense was rolling and they dominated, but when it comes to the Colts, especially last season, those games are just like, how bad do you want it? Like, how can I out-tough you to the finish line, which has kind of become Mike Vrabel's thing as a head coach. And so, you talk about a guy, again, Danico, Jeffrey, and the other guys on the line, they all embody that. And I think the Colts have to be very aware of where they are at all times. And obviously it would help to get 2 of your starting offensive linemen back, because as much as you can try to, hide people or compensate for it, when you're down starters in the NFL, it always affects you in some capacity.
Got you. Now, before we get too far off into talking about this game, we do have to talk about Jonathan Taylor. Now, the news came out that Jonathan Taylor will be practicing this week, starting on Wednesday. So what do you expect to happen? Do you expect him to potentially play, or do you think it's going to be a minute before he gets out there?
So one programming note, right after it was announced by Shane Steichen that JT will return to practice and resume practice Wednesday, the team actually announced that they were going to do a walkthrough instead on Wednesday and now only practice on Thursday and Friday of this week. They haven't released a statement as to why. We'll be able to ask tomorrow. But my guess would be it's because you have, again, 2 starting offensive linemen in the concussion protocol. Kwity Paye is in the concussion protocol, the defensive end. Dallas Flowers, the starting cornerback, just tore his Achilles, he's out for the year. And you're coming off 2 overtime games in a row. So maybe they're just like, okay, we need to just kind of reset, get our bodies together, take another day. So all that to say, I didn't think the chances were very high for Jonathan Taylor to immediately come back, practice 3 days, and play. And I think the likelihood is even less with 2 practices to go out there and play against the Titans. So I don't expect to see him personally. Now that could change. It's not a report. Like, I'm just telling you what common sense would tell me. This guy has not participated in an on-field team activity since last December, when the Colts blew the biggest lead ever, at Minnesota, which everyone kind of remembers. But it's been that long. It's been like 9 months. So although he's been, training on his own, rehabbing on his own, he hasn't done any team activities. He hasn't been on the field, Anthony Richardson, in any official capacity. So to expect him to just come out and start and get like 20 carries, yes, it's a running back, so it's a little bit different. You don't have to maybe know as many schemes or whatever, but it's still a new system. You're still dealing with a new quarterback, and you're coming off of just not playing. So conditioning-wise, you know how it is. Like Mike, you talk about being in shape. There's being in shape when you're training, and there's being in football shape and kind of, dealing with those things. So I don't expect to see him this upcoming week, but a lot of Colts fans are just happy to hear anything about him possibly returning to the team. The one caveat I will say is that he hasn't been officially added to the 53-man roster. Otherwise, he'd be mandated to talk to us, and I'll be asking all of the questions. But, everyone got excited because Shane Steichen said that JT is excited to return, excited to be with his teammates, all those things, which could be true. JT is not getting paid by his teammates or the coach. He has no reason to be mad at them. However, there's got to be more there, right? Like a person who's an elephant in the room is the contract situation. So I can't imagine that you come back from off the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list, and everything's just hunky-dory and everybody's singing Kumbaya. There's probably still some tension there, whether it's with higher ups, whether it's with Chris Ballard, the GM, or Jim Irsay, the owner. There's some tension there. And until JT tells us he's excited, I'm waiting to see it, because it feels like, it's excitement by force, because you read the CBA, you realize I ain't really got no other options at this point. I got to go play. And so, again, whether he's out there because he has to be or he wants to be, we'll find out more whenever he decides to talk to the media, because we haven't talked to this guy since June. So, again, I get it. Like, Shane Steichen's kind of speaking for him. Oh, he's excited. I'm sure he is. But he didn't have another option but to be excited, because if you don't do this, you don't fill your contractual obligations, and then you get into a bunch of just legality things where you could run the risk of not honoring your contract and all the penalties that come from that. So I'm excited to potentially talk to him soon, see him play soon, and obviously in a vacuum it will be a huge boost, whether it was this week or next week or whenever, to get JT back in this offense, because they've been pretty good without him. And then if you add another dynamic skill position player in there with him, the sky's the limit.
Yeah, definitely. And it would give a lot of problems to the Titans in terms of having to deal with another weapon out there. Now, getting back to the offense of course, getting back to players that we know are going to play in the game. We don't know yet about JT, but the Colts wide receivers. Now they've made a few things happen, but they're also going against the Titans secondary that's let a few things happen. Now, in the last game, the first drive, the Bengals were doing a few things, running the football, throwing the football, but other than that, kind of shut them down. But the games before that, the first 3 games before that, the Titans gave up at least 5 plays of 20-plus yards or more. Going into this game, of course, the Colts had to be, wondering which Titans secondary is going to show up along with the defensive line. But there's going to be opportunities. Do you expect Shane Steichen to kind of test that secondary just a little bit more maybe than what the Bengals did last week?
I think they'll try, but a lot of the teams, and I expect the Titans to be the same, they're trying to force Anthony Richardson to beat him underneath. And while he can get hot like he did towards that fourth quarter against the Rams, where he kind of turned it on and made, I think on that game-tying drive, he was like 4 or 5 and, had some downfield throws, all those things. He still was like 11 of 25 overall. So everyone who just looks at the box score and be like, oh, it's terrible. If you watch the game, it wasn't that bad. He had some really explosive plays, some plays that should have been made from other players. But all that in mind, ideally they would want to push the ball down the field. But I think for the Titans' sake, they're going to try to keep things underneath, force him to be sort of a pocket precision passer, which he's shown the ability to be, but that's not his strong suit. His strong suit is kind of the, getting out and kind of the Patrick Mahomes type stuff. Not saying he's Patrick Mahomes at all, but just some of that broken play, extended stuff, and then some of the designed runs, designed bootlegs, things like that. So we'll see. But I know one guy that Colts fans truly want to see get going is Alec Pierce, the second-year wide receiver. He's someone who's known for the deep ball. So if they are going to try to go over the top, he will be somebody I keep an eye on.
Definitely. And, I just wonder about that, too, in terms of Alec Pierce, too, because he's been pretty quiet, definitely, to start the season.
Yeah, I think part of it is, again, they're trying to force everything underneath, and his specialty is not underneath. And they've had Josh Downs, rookie wide receiver, who stepped up in the slot. Michael Pittman Jr., who's a possession wide receiver. He can pretty much run any route. He's been pretty good. But, again, I think of all the people who have to adjust the most, it's him, because you're dealing with a quarterback who, one, isn't going to throw it as many times as a traditional quarterback, because he also has the dual threat ability. He has the design runs. He's probably going to have, like, at minimum 5 design runs a game, which for some quarterbacks could be 5 passes. But at the same time, there's also been opportunities where he just hasn't won that 50-50 ball. And it's not like he's out here dropping everything like some fans kind of insinuate. There has been moments where you're like, man, you got to catch that one. But there's also been moments where the defensive back has made a great, breakup or something like that. It just comes down to can he win more 50-50 balls too when he does get his limited opportunities. And as unfair as it is, this, Mike, like, football is weird in a sense where you won't blame a guy if, you go up for a catch and someone breaks it up. But after a while, the narrative does become, if you don't ever win 50-50 balls, which is not the case with Alec Pierce. He's won. He had a really great one actually last week that helped set him up and get him back in the game on a defensive pass interference. He still caught it. But all that to say, what I'm talking about. Like, sometimes you just like, man, you got to come down. Whatever happens, you got to win sometimes. And so that's the next step for Alec, is to make sure that he, wins maybe a little bit more of those 50-50 balls and makes it, sort of a 60-40, 70-30 type of thing.
Got you. Okay, we're going to flip over to the defense. Now, there is a particular gentleman that got going last week, had his best game of the season. That would be Mr. Derrick Henry. Of course, with it, he has 20 carries or more. The Titans for this season, the Titans are 2-0. 0-2 when he gets less than that. So going into this game, of course, he's going to be a huge, huge key to it. So what are some of the keys you think for the Colts defense to try to slow this man down?
Stack the box and pray. No, I'm joking. I think you got to be mindful. You have to gang tackle. And I also think that you have to force them into those longer downs, right? So you can't give up those chunk yardage plays where we see a Derrick Henry rip off 7-8 yards and give him, second and short, third and short. You want to try to keep him in long, distance downs. And also, if you're going to do that, you want to try to force them to throw the ball and beat you with Ryan Tannehill. You know what Derrick Henry can do. You know what Ryan Tannehill can do as well. You know their strengths. And if you had to choose in a vacuum which you would rather prefer, you'd want them to not hand the ball off to their best player and try to win with other guys. And so I think you got to just stack the box, be sound in your assignments. And I will say that the Colts' defense, the weak parts of it are not up front, it's the back end. And maybe the Titans do sort of exploit that even with Derrick Henry, where they're looking to just kind of push the ball down the field because the defensive secondary is so inexperienced. Because if you're trying to run it in between the tackles, yes, Derrick Henry is superhuman, but I just don't see how smart that is to try to run up against DeForest Buckner, Grover Stewart, who are two of the better defensive tackles in the league. And like I said, some of the defensive ends stepping up. Kwity, we don't know because he's in Kwity Paye. He's in the concussion protocol. Dayo Odengbo had a really big game last week, probably the best of his career. And so the Colts' run defense has been better than their back end, but at the same time, you just cannot let Derrick Henry beat you. I mean, it's like in any sport to me. It's like knowing that, you're going to play Kobe Bryant in the NBA or something like that. You can't let him go for 60. You know who he is. So, I look at it like this. If Derrick Henry has 15 great pass pro blocks and y'all win and the Titans win like that, hey, I took my cap. But I'm not going to let you just churn out, 30 carries for $180 and act like I'm surprised that you handed the ball off. No.
I hear you there. And it's going to be interesting. And then also, you touched on it. Testing the secondary. Of course, both teams are probably going to try to test the secondaries. Yeah. But you have a Titans team that when they get going in terms of their style of play, and I will say that Tim Kelly's kind of throwing a few wrinkles in with a few more, a little, organized passing in terms of drop back passes as opposed to play action passes. But you got the weapons like Burks, Hopkins, you got Chris Moore. Chris Moore is probably averaging about 30 some odd yards per catch because every one of his catches is a deep ball. What is your level of concern with the consistent deep ball that the Titans are getting at least a couple of these every game versus the Colts secondary?
Like I told you, I think that's their weak point, and it got weaker without Dallas Flowers being out for the year. Great dude, by the way, incredible story. Went to 4 different colleges, never played Division I. Football, was playing college basketball at one point, ended up making it to the NFL last year as an undrafted rookie, making the 53-man roster, earning a start at the end of last year, starting this year, and then tears his Achilles. It's like, wow, that's a big blow to their secondary. But I say that because, while he didn't have a lot of experience, they don't really have much experience behind him either. Darrell Baker Jr., second-year pro, also undrafted. He began the year as a starter, had a rough week 2 against Houston, got benched, and was a healthy scratch the last 2 weeks. He's back in the mix to potentially start, along with 7th-round pick Jalen Jones. So those two will compete for that 3rd starting cornerback spot. You got Kenny Moore, obviously, and then you have Julius Brents, 2nd-round pick. But even with Kenny Moore being an experienced guy, he can't give his experience to everybody else, right? He can't give his knowledge in real time on every play to everybody else. Even with Julius Brents, had a great, debut in week 3 at Baltimore. Him and Kenny Moore had a miscommunication on the game-winning touchdown pass that Matt Stafford threw to Puka Nacua for a game-winning touchdown. It was a blown coverage, and that's an inexperienced moment. You know what I mean? Like, that's one of those things where I think the Titans see that, and you're like, you know what? Let's throw some more exotic things at them. Let's throw things that maybe they haven't seen. Let's do some things to make these second-year guys, rookies, uncomfortable and see what they got. Now, if you step up to the challenge, I'm sure they will adjust. But, again, I think the Titans will do this, and every team for the rest of the season will really try to see just how confident you are in that secondary and how young they are, and if you're just playing them because you have to.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely going to be an interesting game. Both teams have issues in their secondary. Both teams have had line issues. It's going to be just interesting who is able to make more plays to win this game. Of course, we're done talking about Colts and Titans, but at the end of every show, there's always a game. It's 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. James Boyd, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. You got Edgerrin James or Marshall Faulk. You have to choose one running back. Which one are you taking?
Give me Edge. I love Edge just from a personal standpoint. I feel like he gave the greatest Hall of Fame speech ever, inducted into the corrections, center of Canton, whatever, Ohio, where they talked about his image and how he carried himself and thought he would be like some thug or something like that. He ended up being a stand-up dude and a great, running back along with Marshall Faulk as well. But my preference is Edgerrin James because I'm a James. So there you go.
All right. You have one city to visit away from work, Houston or Nashville. Which one are you taking?
Give me Nashville. I feel like everything in Houston closed early when we were there. I was like, man, what the heck? Like, barbecue spots closing at 8 and all that. And I'm like, I can't get no food on a Saturday night at like 9. What the heck is going on? I like Nashville. The first time I went last year, had a great time. I went to a Predators game, so I enjoyed myself on that side of things. But give me Nashville.
Okay, all right. We'll go basketball a little bit. We're gonna go a little old school basketball.
Okay.
You got 1 point guard.
All right.
Isaiah Thomas or Magic Johnson. Who are you taking?
Oh man. Oh man. Give me Isaiah. I'm gonna go Isaiah Thomas. I know he wasn't a better player, in my opinion, but I liked that he was the villain. I liked that he was the person that beat, Michael Jordan and was kind of top dog before Michael Jordan, established his stuff on the throne. So give me Isaiah Thomas, who I think is the second best little guard of all time behind Steph Curry. Like him, I put Steph 1, Isaiah 2, maybe Allen Iverson 3 as far as like my 6'2", 6'3", and under guards.
Okay. All right. I'm going to show this video to somebody, and I think a particular person, she's going to love what you said about Steph Curry.
Okay.
But but the last one, we're going to go to Indianapolis, the wall of quarterbacks they have had since Andrew Luck. We've got Carson Wentz or Phillip Rivers. Which one do you like more?
Got to go with Phillip.
One game to win.
Got to go with Phillip. One game to win. Obviously Carson Wentz, big arm, big talent, but I feel like just Phillip Rivers from the cerebral standpoint, consistency standpoint, you know what you're going to get pretty much every single game from Phillip Rivers, along with a bunch of dead gummits and whatever else he says, because he's so like Christian and never curses. So I think that's a guy I'll roll with. And I'm sure a lot of Colts fans will probably lean that way too, just given how their 2 years, 1 year for each player, but how their years kind of went here in Indy.
The funny thing was Carson Wentz didn't really have a ton of interceptions, but when he had them, you knew when they happened.
Yeah, it's one of those things, again, where you can't watch the box score. You got to, like, watch the games to kind of get the feel for it.
Right, exactly. That was the funny part about Carson Wentz. Statistically, he had a really good year, but if you watch the games, you knew when it came to crunch time, he just wasn't it.
It was tough, man.
So,
tough break.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Fortunately, well, knock on some wood here, Colts fans are hoping that Anthony Richardson is their last starting quarterback for a while, because they had a stretch there where they were starting a different quarterback in week 1 for, I believe, like 7 consecutive years. AR is the 7th consecutive year, but they had a different week 1 starting quarterback. So they're hoping to end that streak for the next 15 if he's the guy.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. 5 questions, 2 answers, and 1 choice. You're off the hot seat. James Boyd, thank you for dropping your extensive knowledge on the Indianapolis Colts on my podcast. Greatly appreciated. The floor is yours. Tell everyone what you're working on, where they can find you on social media.
I would just say, check me out at Romeoville Kid on Twitter, Instagram, even TikTok. You might see me dancing in a hotel last year in Jacksonville. It wasn't the most professional thing, but it was fun. I like fun. Also, you can read my work at The Athletic. I got some stuff coming out. Another piece on JT, what it all means, what's next for him, potentially, all those things. And also, I got a Zach Moss feature I'm working on. So he's kind of been like the fill-in for JT, but it's deeper than that. He's a great human being, going into his background, where he came from, how he got to where he is now. So I think people will enjoy that later this week.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at MikePatton. I'm sorry, the artist formerly known as Twitter. Let me say it correct. The artist formerly known as Twitter at MikePatton82. That's MikePatton 82. And also you can find me on Instagram and Threads at that's THA, not THE, _general_MP. Of course, you can find Touring the AFC South on YouTube. You can find it also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you all for tuning in to Touring the AFC South. I'm your host, Mike Patton. We're out. Peace.